Prior to joining Hi-Line, Vitor worked on creating, implementing, and standardizing nutritional metrics for commercial layer flocks. Vitor also holds an animal science degree, an MBA in industrial poultry, and an MBA in business management. So, welcome, Vitor. The stage is all yours. Thank you.
All right, guys, thanks so much for the very nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be back with you guys, at least virtually, in these crazy COVID times. Unfortunately, we cannot be together physically, but let's hope that in the near future, we can repeat this kind of event in person, that it's always better. So I hope you guys can already see my screen. Can you?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So for today's presentation, we're gonna focus a little bit, and I seen that the results that I'm getting from India, it's improving the performance of the W80. Every single generation, it's improving, and I seen some good results in longer cycles without a molt. And what we want to talk today is the nutrition adjustments to make this genetic perform well in a longer cycle. Okay, so that's what we would call a single cycle. And I understand that the focus for today, what we wish and what we want to see mainly is the adjustments that we need to do during the production phase. But of course, it's impossible to just change some minor aspects in the production phase and achieve a single cycle. A single longer cycle is something that is a prevention, and that we need to start as a chick, as a pullet. And then if we do everything well, it's going to be quite easy to adjust the nutrition for the production phase to do in a longer cycle. So it's impossible to talk on single cycle nutrition or long cycle nutrition without talking at least some basic points on the growing phase and developer phase. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk a little bit today, and then we go to the production phase. Some genetic aspects that it's key for us to understand. We had some changes in the hearing phase intake behavior and body weights, as the majority of you guys must be aware. Besides the US, where Hi-Line is based, India is the only country in the world where we have selection, genetic selection. So the Hi-Line is selected in India for the local conditions, and this has been really, really helpful. The performance are every time getting better. And our body weights are growing better now than, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago when we started with the W80. So we had some changes in the nutrition. We don't need to push so strong with the nutrition anymore to gain the body weights. And actually quite the opposite. Sometimes we are seeing some excessive body weights in the later growing phase, let's say the third phase of the development, where we need to be aware, okay? Our birds has a better appetite now in the local conditions, especially during hearing. So as I say, please pay a lot of attention to not have body weights excessive after 12 weeks. Attention a lot to the delay onset of production. That's a key point. And I remember in my visits that sometimes this is something that is happening in the local conditions of India, because we have to delay sometimes the shifting of the birds from the growing to the production. Remember that if we delay these birds in 1-2 weeks, they will have already the hormonal production to start the egg production, and they will gain body weight. If they gain body weight without producing an egg, without being stimulated, without having the proper feed, they will start to have prolapse and mortality after 40, 50 weeks, sometimes even as early as 25 weeks. So we have to try as much as possible to avoid this delayed onset of production, especially if this is associated with an excessive body weight gain, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to control the mortality of these birds. Pre-lay is something that we're gonna see a little bit in detail here. And every time that we wanna these birds to perform better, the more persistence of production we have, the longer the cycle we have, more crucial gonna be the pre-lay. Pre-peak is a period where sometimes we don't give the proper attention. For me, during the production phase is the most critical phase. That's from the first egg to peak of production. And there's some nutritional adjustments that we must do in this phase to ensure that we're gonna have a proper performance. And we're gonna see that, of course, what limits a longer cycle, it's not the egg numbers, but the eggshell quality. So we're going to talk a little bit about the main ingredient and a little bit of the management of calcium in limestone to try to ensure that we have an optimal eggshell quality, right? So let's dive a little bit deeper into the growing phase. What we are seeing here, and I'm sorry, looks like it's a little bit small, but I guess I hope everyone can see. We have a multiphasic growth and development of these birds. So our growing phase can be divided in 4 phases. And it's very important to understand that even though we can have a compensatory body weight gain, we cannot have a compensatory system development. So if you don't gain the body weights up to 4 or 5 weeks, well, you can gain body weight later, you can achieve the standard, but the immunological system of these birds will be underdeveloped and they will be much more prone to disease outbreaks. If you don't achieve the body weights up to 6 weeks, you can achieve the standard later, but your digestible system will be underdeveloped, would be a shorter intestine, and this bird won't have enough absorption area to have all the nutrients that's necessary, so it won't have a good performance. If you don't achieve the body weights from 6 to 12 weeks, well, you don't have a proper skeleton development and you're gonna have a bad eggshell quality after 60 to 65 weeks, if not early. So what I'm trying to say is every single phase is important to be on target or slightly above target. And if even that you can achieve the body weights later, well, you won't develop the systems later on. You need to develop on time. After 12 weeks, that's where we start to develop and accumulate fat in these birds. And that's where I say it's very bad if we go underweight until 12 weeks and then start to get overweight after 12 weeks, because you're going to have a smaller bird, a shorter bird, but fat. That's the most perfect bird to die of prolapse. So that's what we want to avoid. And also remember that even though production starts at 17, 18 weeks, these hens keep growing after 17, 18 weeks. They grow up to 25, 27 weeks. And we need to ensure that this body weight growth happens, because this is what's going to give us persistence of production. So this 4th phase, that is the most important phase for me during production. That's the pre-peak phase, but we're going to go into details. So starting with the basic, and for me, the most important point, that is this part. And we see that's so important that we can even have some correlations between the body weight at 5 weeks and some production traits. That's early production and late production. They are very correlated with livability, because of course, that's where we are developing the immunological system. And of course, if I have a better production and a lower mortality, well, I have more hen-housed eggs. That's a consequence. So this thing is very important. And I will start with the basic. We need to ensure these birds are drinking and eating as soon as possible. Okay, and they have to be eating a complete feed. Never being feeding these birds just with grinded corn, just with energy only. No, they need complete and full feed and water as soon as they arrive to the farm. This is intestinal microscopy, all at the same amplification. So it's not this zoom here is higher than this one. No, it's all at the same distance. And here we can see the effect in 48 hours of the intestinal villi of a chick that had feed plus water since the first day, that had only water, only feed, and that was completely fasting. So you can see that in 48 hours, you can destroy the intestinal villi of these birds, and you can completely ruin the first week performance, where, please take notice, this bird should double the body weight. So regardless what the guides say, if these birds arrived to, if these chicks arrived to your farm as 35 grams, they should reach 70 grams. If they arrived at 40 grams, they should reach 80 grams. So always double the body weight at first week, and they need to have intestinal villi like this to be able to cope with this challenge, right? At 24 hours, I would like to see 100% of your chicks like this, with the crop full of feed and water, okay? These are our targets, 75% already at 6 hours, but 24 hours, all of them should be full. Going from the first phase, and I won't go so deep into the nutritional levels in this phase because the focus would be more on production. We move to the second phase, and I just wanted to emphasize here again how important is the body weight from 6 to 12 weeks. So this is an internal trial here that we did in Hi-Line International, showing the effect of the body weight at 12 weeks with 3 traits: egg numbers, egg weight, and breaking strength of these chickens. And this was made with browns, not leghorns, but for sure it's the same physiology, so we can transpose these results. We have some conclusions from this trial. The first one, we start to lose egg numbers when you have excessive body weight. So if you go too high in body weight, well, we all know what happens, right? Fatty liver, excessive fat pad, mortality, and bad egg numbers and shell quality. The same way, if we are under the body weight, we also lose egg numbers. So you need to be exactly on target with the body weight, right? What we see, yes, body weight has a direct impact in egg weights. So you can see that the heaviest birds have the heaviest egg weight. I do understand that India is not looking for heavy egg weights, so you need to avoid excessive body weights, especially at the third phase of the growing, if you want to be able to control the egg weight. It's much difficult to control the egg weight in a bigger bird, not only because of the frame of this bird, but because they will also have a very unregulated appetite. They will eat a lot. But the key message is here. Even with a higher egg weight, this flock here or these hens here had a better eggshell quality, a better breaking strength than these eggs because of the skeleton development. So if the skeleton was well developed, even with a 6 to 8% heavier egg weight, they had a 4 to 90% better breaking strength than the smaller eggs. So for me, the key message was this: without a good development of the skeleton, lower egg weight does not guarantee good eggshell quality. So if you want to have a good eggshell quality, you need to develop the skeleton. And that's why internally we are developing again, and we hope to be able to publish this soon, shank length or tarsus length standards for our lines again, to measure easily and have some reference for the skeleton development of these birds, okay? Moving on this phase, particle size is key, right? I do in India is very similar to my home country, Brazil, where we don't have much fiber ingredients available. So we need to rely a lot on the particle size to develop gizzard size. Developing gizzard size is going to be key for the birds to be able to eat properly. And we can see here that when we increased the particle size from 336 microns to 1100 microns, we have almost linear development in the gizzard size. So that's what we are looking for. And for sure, a gizzard size that it's at least twice the size of the proventriculus, okay? If we have a gizzard size that's the same size of the proventriculus, that's a clear sign of undeveloped gizzard. and limitation of feed intake. So what we are looking for our birds from 6 weeks onwards, it's 900 to 1200 microns. Okay, the same particle size as an adult bird is eating. Pullet with 5-6 weeks should start to eat and eat this for the whole life. For us to have an idea, is something more or less like this. Okay, this is a 1200 micron average diet. Feed intake is going to be crucial. If we don't have the proper feed intake, we won't have a good development. And I know that in some areas of India, especially during the summer months around May, it could be quite crucial or quite difficult and challenging to achieve a good feed intake of these birds. And what we can see here from this publication is that with the same protein, or let's say amino acid levels, the birds will react to energy levels. Okay, so if you go very high, you can achieve a very good body weight, but you're gonna limit a little bit the feed intake. If you go lower on energy, these birds will eat more. And I know that in India, we are a little bit closer from this level, so we need to be prepared and we need to have enough feed from them to eat this 10% more feed that they're gonna need if we were feeding like, let's say 3000 kilocalories. So be aware that these hens should be eating higher than the standard during the growing phase to be able to achieve the body weight standards. So remember again that this development gonna be critical, but also remember that whenever we are feeding coarse diets, these birds will selective eating. So they are attracted by the particle size. So they will eat the coarse particles first, and they will leave the fines behind. So you need to ensure enough time for these birds to eat all the fines. If we are keep feeding them a lot of times, they will not eat the fines that where the amino acids are, where the vitamins are, where the trace minerals are. So you need to ensure enough time for these birds to eat all the fines. So I would like at least once per day, especially if the weather is not a problem. On the first half of the day, have something like this, and then on the second half, they should eat as much as possible. Ideally, we should divide the feed intake in 40% in the morning, 60% in the afternoon. So that's why when we are having automatic feeders, what we are doing is feeding a little bit less in the morning, one full feeding in the morning, so all the birds can awake and eat, maybe a second feed, and then we're gonna feed these birds more in the afternoon, because we want them to have enough limestone for the second half of the day or for the night, where they're gonna produce the eggshell. So this is the ideal management if we have a good temperature. Of course, if we are in heat stress, then we have to feed more these birds in the morning, because then it's just a matter of having enough feed and not worrying so much about the limestone. But we do understand that if we feed more in the morning, we're gonna have eggshell quality problems, okay? Pre-lay is gonna be critical, as I said. Ideally, we should feed these birds no more than 1% of calcium until 14, 15, 16 weeks, and then we should use the pre-lay. This pre-lay should have 2.5 to 2.7% of calcium, and 50% of this calcium should be in form of coarse limestone. So ideally, they need to have contact with coarse limestone before the production starts. And then at no more than 2% of production, we move these birds to the coarse, to the limestone amount or the calcium amount that the production phase has. That's gonna be a wide range depending on the feed intake on the variety. But for sure, what we want to have is this, and we want to avoid this kind of kill bone. That's a very clear sign of lack of nutrients, especially trace minerals, calcium, and phosphorus. Okay, so pre-lay is key, guys. Pre-lay is very key. I do understand that sometimes if we have more than 10 days difference inside the same flock, it's not going to be easy to do the pre-lay. So in this case, instead of doing the pre-lay, you're going to do a developer phase with higher calcium. 1.4 to 1.6%. And this will be a little middle term. It's not to be excessive calcium that could damage the kidney of these birds and generate some problems, but not will be a very low calcium that will not fulfill the medullary bones. So it's a little bit of a compensation, but for sure, this practice is not as good as a prelay. Okay, so they need to eat prelay and they need to eat coarse limestone. Why they need to eat coarse limestone? Because the retention time. So what we are seeing here is the time of the day, and we can see that when we are eating fine limestone, well, we have a very good peak of ionized calcium in the blood at the moment that we need, but at the night moment where the eggshell is forming, we don't have much calcium. So we need fine limestone during the day, and through the night we need coarse limestone or grit, as we say here, because of course we see the calcium levels in the blood get very higher with grit, because this is the calcium that is retained in the gizzard, in the proventriculus, and it's gradually being released through the night when the bird is not eating. Remember that 80 to 85% of the shell is formed through the night when the bird is not eating. So they will rely a lot on this coarse limestone. And if they don't have this limestone, they will deplete calcium from the bones and they will have problems. After the prelay, the critical period gonna be the pre-peak phase from first egg to the peak of production. These birds, remember, as we said, they should be gaining body weight, and they should be gaining at least 16% of body weight from the first egg to peak of production. They should be gaining at least 20% of feed intake and 16% of egg weight. If we achieved the peak of production with these goals being achieved, it means that we achieved the peak of production without sacrificing so much body weight and body reserves. So this bird will have a better persistence of production. If we achieved the peak of production without these KPIs here, so probably the persistence of production will not be as good, okay? So just summarizing what we saw here, we can manipulate this feed intake of these birds here with midnight feeding. We all know, we didn't say here in detail, but you guys know midnight feeding. With energy levels, we cannot go very high in energy because this will restrict the feed intake at this phase. Good particle size, empty feeder management, and especially remember, it has to be enough time to eat the fines, but not long enough for these birds to starve. If we have, I know that's not the major reality, but if you have controlled environment, you can decrease a little bit the temperature to make these birds eat better and have a better production, and a little bit attention to the sodium levels onto this phase. If you don't have enough sodium, remember that amino acids are sodium dependent to be absorbed. You won't have a good amino acid absorption, but you have too much sodium, you're gonna have runny manure. Critical point and most critical point for me in pre-peak, you should increase at least 20 to 30% the vitamin and trace mineral content of these diets, because of course the feed intake is still very low. The vitamin concentration that we have in the guides are calculated to a mature feed intake, but during this phase where the feed intake is still low, we should try to increase at least in 20 to 30% the vitamins in premix, let's say until the W80 cross 95 grams, then we can go back to the normal levels, okay? Critical point for eggshell quality, our birds are getting more persistent. Every single genetic, you guys can see the W80 in India, that sometimes we have 5-6 weeks above 90%. Well, now we are seeing flocks overcoming 70 to 70-something weeks, with production is still above 90%. So the performance in India is getting better and better. So if we keep the formulas changing by production, we're gonna delay a lot the changing of phases, and we're gonna have very old laying hens eating a low calcium diet. So that's why my recommendation is, regardless of the production, you always need to keep adjusting the calcium and phosphorus according to the age of the birds, so you can provide the proper amount of calcium and phosphorus for these birds to have a good eggshell quality. This is crucial to be done because of this. This is the daily calcium flow. I won't go into too much in the details here, but this is the critical part. From all the calcium intake of the day, no more than 2.5% of this calcium goes for replace the calcium reserves inside the medullary bones. It's a very limited route. And if we start to feed these birds a little bit bad in calcium, they're going to start to deplete calcium from the bones, as I said. And what happens, they will not be able to replace this calcium because it's a limited route. So remember this, if we remove calcium too fast from these birds, the only way to replace and to recover these reserves is stopping the production, that is molting, okay? It's very difficult, not to say impossible, to recover calcium reserves in laying hens with high egg production because they are in a constantly negative calcium flow. Okay, so very important to understand that this rule is very limited, this route is very limited, and we need to preserve this. So always remember, you have two sources of calcium from the shell, feed and bones. But the bones are like the savings account. We should not touch. We should keep this saving as much as possible. Okay. Let's not go so much into details of this, but the main point of this message is that in a normal condition, a laying hen will remove calcium from the cortical bone to keep the medullary bone in a steady calcium level. So that's why when you don't do a good job with the calcium management of these birds, as soon as you start to have eggshell problems, you start to have cage fatigue because they are depleting also calcium from the cortical bone. So even that the medullary bone doesn't have a very important role in the movement of these birds or on the posture or the structure of the bird, but the cortical bone has, and they are removing calcium from the cortical bone to keep the medullary bone with a proper level. So all of these birds, all of the metabolism of these hens are made to produce an egg. It's so efficient that the amount of the calcium that they have in the medullary bone, if you calculate 480 eggs, that what a hen should produce around 100 weeks, it's about 1,500 times the daily withdrawal of calcium. So the metabolism of these birds are fantastic, okay? And we need to support that. One of the ways to support that, as I said already, is to split the calcium and make 40% of the distribution of the feed in the morning, 60% in the afternoon. And the reason for that is this. If you see the behavior of the hens when they have an open source of calcium, they will eat much more in the second half of the day because they are, of course, are trying to retain calcium, to retain limestone for the second half of the day and for the night when they are not eating, but they are producing an eggshell. So remember, peak of calcium intake should be 5 to 6 hours prior to the dark period. Okay, that's the moment where they should be eating more and more calcium to be prepared for the night. It's not only about to eat the calcium, but to eat a good calcium. So for me, retention time of the calcium, it's gonna be crucial. If you say, okay, I'm providing coarse limestone, we need to understand what's the particle size and what is the solubility. And I know that sometimes we don't have this handy, so a very quick and easy way that I like to do to measure this is just go to the farms. We have a scale, we have a bucket, we have some sieves. You go in the morning, collect fresh manure that has to be fresh. Let's say in this case, 500 grams. And then you put some acid solution, let's say water with vinegar here. You keep washing this manure until you remove the limestone. And then you calculate the amount of limestone that you have in this manure. In this case, you have 3.4%. So that's perfect. These hens should have about 3 to 6% limestone in the manure. If we have more than that, well, it means it's a very hard limestone, insoluble limestone, or it's too big. They don't have enough time to consume this limestone and being excreted in the feces. If you have less than 3%, well, it's too soft, it's too soluble, it's too small, and they are solubilizing or they are digesting too fast, and it's not being available to the end of the day. Like I saw in this farm that has a 72% solubility of limestone, that of course for a 3 to 4 millimeters should be no more than 40%. And when we try to recover, the manure in the limestone was no more than 1 to 1.3%. So of course, in this case, what is the solution? Well, in this case, I'm using almost 90 to 95% coarse limestone and not 70-30 as we recommend, because I know that the majority of the limestone is being grinded to fine limestone as soon as these birds eat. So the proportion of limestone, coarse and fine, and the particle side should be decided together with the solubility, okay? There's here some pictures of different ways to feed limestone by the end of the day. And this is quite important. So different systems, if you guys want to discuss a little bit later, I will be available. But this is just some different systems where at the end of the day, you can add some coarse limestone. And this is becoming more and more popular, okay? One critical message, after you've done everything right, you have the growing, the developer, the pre-peak, is to maintain these birds in the body weight that they need and provide the proper nutrients. And that's the final phase of this presentation. Feed these birds for the balance, no more and no less. Both of them will be bad. If you have excessive nutrients for these birds, you're going to increase the body weight. And if you have increased body weight, for sure, these birds need more nutritional levels. So it will be more expensive to produce an egg and will be more uneven because heavy birds have unbalanced appetites. They will eat too much. You need to expend energy to eliminate excess of protein in some cases. So instead of using energy to produce an egg, you are using energy to eliminate excess of protein. These birds will have aggressive behavior if they have too much nutritional levels. They will have excessive egg weight, and of course, this is always mean prolapse and cannibalism. And you're going to lose body weight uniformity, and you're going to have dominance of these birds. So that's what we want to try to avoid. If you don't have enough nutrients, of course, you have a lower body weight and uniformity, you have poor peaks of production, poor persistence of production, and you have a lower egg weight, especially in the beginning of the production, the egg weight will not grow so as fast. So my practical recommendation is how I like to do, and that's what I'm trying to translate in the management guides. For every single week of production, you have a certain body weight, you have a certain body weight gain, you have a certain production and a certain egg weight. And then we calculated some feathering scores and you have the environmental temperature. All of this gonna give me some energy recommendations for leghorns, for browns, for cage free. We're gonna have all of these numbers. We're gonna cross this with the amount of energy in the feed, and this has to be the feed intake, or the opposite. If I have the feed intake, this should be the energy levels in the feed, okay? All of these equations here, I don't have one specifically. I average all the equations available since the 1980s until 2017, a lot of them, so we cannot only go to one side, but it's important to understand it's an average of all of what is available. After that, we do the same thing for lysine, but based on the feed intake that we had here, we do the same calculation for lysine, and then we calculate the lysine in the diet. And having the lysine in the diet, we can have all the other amino acids. Remember that to alternative systems, 2 to 5% more energy, and the body weight will affect a lot the energy requirements of the birds. If you have not enough energy in the birds, they will use amino acids as source of energy. So that's something that's very common, especially during the onset of production. If the energy in the feed is not enough, these birds use amino acids as energy, and the egg weight will take too long to get to the point where they should be. So if you have a bird that's taking too long to gain body weight, and it's taking too long to achieve the egg weight, you can be sure that they are using amino acids as source of energy. Okay, so it's 3 minutes already past my time. So to summarize everything, growing phase will affect all the production phase. It's impossible to achieve a good performance in production, feed these birds in a single cycle without having a good growing performance. Body weight will affect persistence of production and mortality. 12 weeks body weight will affect the egg numbers and the shell quality. 12 to 16 weeks body weight will affect mortality, especially for prolapse and cannibalism. Pre-lay gonna be key. Without pre-lay, you won't have a good egg shell quality point. Pre-picking, if you don't achieve the proper body weight during the pre-picking, 18 to 25 weeks, or first egg to peak of production, you won't have a good persistence of production. Post-peak, if you don't feed these birds for the balance, well, they will not have a good persistence of production, or it's going to be too expensive to produce an egg. And calcium and limestone aspects, you need to feed the proper amount of calcium, but at the right timing, the right moment of the day, and with a good limestone. In a good limestone, it's not only the amount of calcium, but especially the solubility and the particle size. And always feed these birds for the balance, right? So a little bit challenging to say everything in 30 minutes. So with 34 minutes and 46 seconds, I say thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vitor.
Thanks,
yes, we will now take the Q&A. So we do have some questions, but I request everyone to take a moment and post your questions on the Q&A button. If you click on that, you can start posting your questions there. And we'll start answering those. All right. Vitor, we can start taking the questions now.
Okay.
You might have to say, where is the Q&A button? People may not know where is the Q&A button. So
yes, on your screen, there is a chat icon and there is a Q&A icon.
On the lower part?
On the lower part.
And if they're from a mobile?
On the mobile also, they will see that Q&A icon. So select the, yeah. Please click on the Q&A icon and start posting your message there. Thank you.
Okay. Should I start?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay. So the first question, do you want me to read, or do you want to read and I answer? How do we going to do this?
You can read that, Vitor. I think you should read, and then we will also give you something which is not here. When we get it directly, we will read it.
So the first question is how to control mortality. That's a very tricky question. We have a very broad spectrum here. I will also ask Greg, Dr. Hama, Dr. Sridhar to help me here, because I guess the first thing you need to understand why these birds are dying. Okay, if it's I will focus a little bit more on the nutrition side, and I will let Dr. Hama and Greg help me with the veterinary side. But for the nutrition side, mortality usually it's a consequence of unbalanced nutrient intake or complete lack of nutrient intake. This can be a consequence of bad body weight uniformity. You have dominant birds eating all the feed that they need, and you have dominated birds that don't have enough time to eat. And then you have sometimes bad feed that doesn't have enough vitamins, enough trace minerals And bad feed is not because the ingredient's not there, but mainly sometimes because the mixing quality is not good. The distribution of the feed is not food. These birds will lack of nutrients, they will lack of development, and they will end up dying because they don't have opportunity to eat. And one of the main causes of mortality by nutrition is excessive body weight or regular body weight associated with low excessive egg weight associated with low body weight. So they die of prolapse. Now on the management side and on the veterinary side, for sure, Greg and Dr. Rama can help me here.
Sure. Vitor, I 100% agree with everything that you've said there from a nutritional point of view. From a disease or a management point of view, what you really need to establish is why the birds are dying. And I think Vitor started with that one. If you can do post-mortem examinations on those birds and establish for yourself the body condition, and in conjunction with a veterinarian or a consulting animal health technician, establish a point that you can start to investigate, I think that's really the starting point. I know that Srinivasa have got an excellent team of people that are more than capable of helping you with this regard. So my first word of advice would be making contact with one of your representatives or your technical service people, and then taking it from there.
Awesome. That's very good, Greg. Thank you. And this also helps us to answer the second question, that is how to increase productivity. Would be the same approach, understanding why this is happening. And all of what we said here will help with the productivity. And also, the key part for me in productivity is body weight uniformity. If you have good body weight uniformity, everything gets easier. So if you have to choose just one trait, go with uniformity, because this is going to help the production. The next question is, can egg size be decreased once the poultry producers get bigger egg size without affecting production? Yeah, that's very challenging. Huh? For me, egg size control, it's all about prevention. Okay, once you have a bigger egg, it's very, very difficult to do it. It can be done, but invariable, it will affect the production a little bit. So my advice will be 2 grams, 2.5 grams before the desired egg weight, you start to control amino acids. Never try to control egg weight decreasing only methionine. If you only remove methionine from the feed, you're going to give an unbalanced feed. You're going to affect the feather coverage of these birds. You're going to affect the behavior of these birds. You're going to decrease the production, and you will not affect the egg weight significantly. So you have to control all the amino acids at the same time, but keeping the ideal protein of this. Okay, so 2 grams before you start to do that. Once you have a egg weight that's too big, you can do this, but then you need to manipulate a little bit the energy as well, and this will affect the production. The next question is, it's observed that if we prepone lighting either to end of 15 week or beginning of 16 weeks, W8 have a higher peak, 96% of persistence for a longer time. So is early lighting advisable or not? So this is more on the management. I will leave it to Greg.
Okay, so I'm not surprised if you notice this by postponing the light. What we need to remember, and I will get into more of this detail in the webinar that I present on Monday, but if we are postponing a light on the flock, we are giving that flock more opportunity to eat and to put on body weight.
And it's preponing here, okay, Greg?
Postpone.
Preponing.
Preponing.
Yeah, early lighting, they are saying. If
so
early
if
lighting.
It earlier.
Yes.
Okay. That surprises me, to be honest. I would expect and really have expected it to be the opposite way around. If you move the light earlier to the 15th week, let me have a look at this question again. You're preponing the lighting to the end of the 15th week or the 16th week. So if you're pushing those birds earlier, you might very well see a higher peak, but I really doubt that you're going to get the persistency out of those birds if you push them too early. The birds might physiologically have everything in place to be able to come into lay with a high peak, but they will not necessarily have those body reserves that they need in order to be able to persist for a very long period of time. So although initially it might seem that you are winning because you're getting a very high peak, in the long run, you're actually sacrificing eggs because you're just not making them up and you lose out towards the end of the cycle. When we focus on pushing birds and taking them longer, we really, really want to focus on getting the body weight, which is on the standard according to our breed standard, and the uniformity of that body weight within the flock to be above 85%. And if we're hitting those numbers, then really that is what is the indicator for us that the birds are ready to be lit up. To be moving them simply earlier and earlier because we think that those birds are there is I think playing with your egg numbers.
I fully agree. Thanks, Greg. The next question is, birds are quite sensitive, and sometimes we can see the fear factor in the bird. It's quite difficult to move in a house, especially in battery cages with 8-9 birds per box, and birds at pre-lay and pre-peak. Any specific reason or solution, Hi-Line W80? First, I'd like to understand that if we call fear factor is the birds being too active and flying around and too active. If this is the case, well, this is kind of expected behavior of the W80. For those of you who knew the W36 that we had in the past, it was even more pronounced. A little bit less with the W80, but still a little bit there. And guys, that's actually a little bit of the consequence of the good livability that we have. To explain a little bit, usually the mortality is caused by the dominant bird attacking the dominated birds. So one of the key ways to keep a low mortality is remove a little bit this social dominance among the hens. So when you don't have so much dominated birds and dominated birds, well, you have birds without a clear hierarchy there, so they are a little bit more flighty around. So it's a little bit of a consequence of a good livability is this behavior. But this behavior is not aggressive, it's not being aggressive, or it's not being fear. It's just a normal behavior of the bird. So in this case, you don't need to worry, and I do understand it's a little bit more pronounced around the pre-peak and about the pre-lay phase, because that's the moment where they have a very drastic change in their metabolism and a very drastic change in the amino acid intake, and the deamination of nitrogen. It's one of the main drivers of this behavior. So yes, it's expected to be more on this moment. How to control mortality at 46 weeks and suddenly mortality increasing from 18 to 20 weeks? I guess it will be kind of what we answered already. The main cause or the main point is to understand why these birds are dying. If it's a management issue or a veterinary issue or a nutritional issue, we can address that. But at these phases, I would say it's very related sometimes in terms of nutrition with a egg weight and a body weight not so compatible. So the majority of the birds that were in the lower side of the uniformity during the growing phase, they will start to die around this age because the egg starts to get too big for them to lay. So in terms of nutrition, that is the main cause at this moment, okay? How to reduce the prolapse incidence? What are the steps to be taken when it's seen? Well, when it's seen, it's, in my opinion, is already a little bit too late. Avoid prolapse, as almost everything is prevention. And the main way to prevent this is to ensure the proper body weight, but mainly the proper uniformity of the flock. Okay. After you start to see prolapse, there's not much you can do to avoid the prolapse, but you can take some steps to avoid the prolapse to evolve to a cannibalism. And that is separate the hens that you see that has blood in their face, that they are killing each other. Well, take out these birds from the cage, big trim, do whatever you do to stress these birds a little bit and remove them from the environment and the dominance so you can stop this behavior a little bit. Greg, do you want to add something on the nutrition, on the management side?
If you have the ability to reduce the light, we do find that helps to calm the birds in this sort of case. And then it also depends on when you are seeing the prolapse, if it's early on or later on in the cycle. So it's important for you to establish if these are young birds doing it or if these are old birds that are prolapsing, and that will help you narrow down the cause a little bit more accurately.
Perfect, perfect, very nice. Which feed would you suggest during the growing phase for better gizzard development, mash or crumbs? For the growing phase, I prefer mash diet. I'm a huge fan of crumbles on the starter phase for several reasons, because and the main reason is because they will not be able to select eating the feed. So they have to eat the whole feed as they should be eating, and that won't happen with mash. We have a little bit of a better digestibility as well, and we are also going to have more nutrients per bite of the feed that they're going to have. So for the starter, makes a lot of sense. But after 5-6 weeks, we need to teach these birds how to eat, and they need to have a good feed intake capacity and a good feed intake attitude. And that's what we achieve with a coarser and mash diet, because they're going to be stimulated by the coarser presentation, they're going to stimulated by the lower energy of the diets, and they're going to learn how to eat. And especially, it's less traumatic transition to a crumble to a mash at 5 weeks than if you keep all the growing phase and then during the production phase where they really need to eat the mash because they need the coarse limestone. It's a more traumatic transition at 17 weeks to transition for crumbles to mash, especially at this moment that they should be eating at their top and gaining body weight. So that's why I like to do this transition around 5-6 weeks, no later than that. How to avoid packing problems is one of the questions here. And as always, I would say we have to understand the source of this behavior. We have several cases of these birds being pecking each other. It can start as a prolapse, as we say, and the birds are simply attracted by the blood, the red color, and they start to peck each other. It can be nutritional if they have some lack of nutrients, as sodium is the most known one, but also some amino acids and also some trace minerals can also trigger this behavior. So the first thing is to understand if they are pecking each other, but they are, for example, pecking the feathers and eating the feathers, or if they are just pecking and you see the feathers on the floor. They are not consuming. So this is going to give you some indication if it's a nutritional deficiency or if some stressing factors, like let's say extreme light intensity, high stocking density. So you have several factors that can be generating this behavior. And in this case, it's to understand why this is happening. Any points, Greg, to add?
No, I think you hit it on the head there, and not to play on that pun, but I think it's important to identify where the pecking is happening. So if it's on the head, and it's an indication of possible dominance. So is the uniformity within that cage such that you're producing weaker birds all the time? Is the pecking of the cloaca, in other words, is it shortly after lay, or is it as a result of a prolapse perhaps? Is it toe pecking, or is it simply birds looking for blood, or poor feathering, like you mentioned? So it can be broken up into a pattern so that we can try and establish what the underlying cause is. You mentioned light. That's great. It's a great way of controlling it. And always has been my knee-jerk reaction when I see it initially is to remove those individuals who are either pecking or being pecked, and put some salt in the water, coarse salt through the water, or a vitamin pack maybe, and that usually resolves it. If you can catch it early, remember this is a learned behavior, so if you can catch it early, you can prevent it from progressing through the flock.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Could you please give some information about DEB and the importance based on climate? Yes, as soon as someone tell me what is
What
DEB?
DEB?
What is de-oiled, essential? What's DEB? Can someone tell me?
Dietary electrolyte balance.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's key. The balance between sodium, potassium, and chloride. It's very important. We should try to keep this at a closer level if we have just a sodium source without chloride around 200. If you have a potassium source around 250. If you have a potassium source. So ideally what we want is increase sodium, increasing potassium, decrease chloride. That's the summary of the game. But remember that the more you increase the sodium with the reduction of chloride, usually this is done with sodium bicarbonate, more you make the environment for the bird alkaline because they are using sodium bicarbonate. That's it's a potent alkaline ingredient. So you need to pay a lot of attention on intestinal quality. You need to acidify. Organic acid is going to be key, but for sure, the electrolyte balance, it's crucial not only in summer, but especially in summer, but throughout the way. So I keep this balance, I no less than 200. And for these challenging moments, I try to give more than 220, ideally 250, if I have potassium available.
If I can just add there quickly, Victor, the physiology behind this is very interesting, and I'm particularly referring to heat stress. And just a reminder that if you go onto our website, the Hi-Line.com website, there is a very nice poster as well as article on the physiology behind heat stress and the electrolyte balance.
Very good, Greg. Yeah. In our website under technical research, right?
Yeah,
We have this article there. What will be the consequence if the bird have 200 grams more than standard, especially in the production aspect? It will depend a lot when you achieve this excessive body weight, in my opinion. The first basic thing is 45 to 55% of the requirements of the birds in terms of energy is body weight maintenance. So the first consequence is if you have a heavier bird, they're gonna be eating much more feed just to stay alive. So you can expect a higher feed intake and of course a poor feed conversion. That's the basic, and that's if everything goes well. Now, if you achieve this excessive body weight just on the third phase of growing and not on the first and second, for sure, you can expect mortality, you can expect prolapse, you can expect fat liver, you can expect excessive fat pad, you can expect dominance of the birds, you can expect aggressive behaviors, all of this as a consequence of excessive body weight. So it will depend a lot on the moment, and usually the outcome of this is not very good. Anything to add, Greg?
No, that's it.
All right. After 40 weeks, body weight is important to maintain good production. Yes, actually, always. I would recommend you guys at least until 32 to 35 weeks. That's the moment where the medullary bone is fully formed and the post-peak is already very clear for the bird and with the body reserves. Until this point, you have to weight the birds weekly. After this moment, you can wait every other week or maybe once per month. But yes, you need to keep a good body weight in balance to have a good persistence of production. Remember that the yolk formation is 33% dependent of the fat reserves of the bird, and the albumin formation depends on 20 to 40% on the muscle reserves of the bird. So if you don't have a good muscle reserve, you don't have a good fat reserve, you won't have yolk, you won't have albumin. If you won't have yolk, you won't have albumin, it's going to be very difficult to produce an egg. This is our observation about increased feed consumption, particularly in winter season, that the feed per day was as high as 120 to 130 milligrams, even though we have maintained 2,600 to 2,660 kilocalories, around 4% to 4.2% calcium in the feed. So what ratio of feed consumption is expected in the winter season, or any corrections do you suggest to provide information? Number two, measures to maintain the calcium balance along with metabolized energy, amino acid profile in the pre-peak, the period that the feed consumption of the bird is about 80 to 95 grams. The manual suggests to maintain around 4.5 to 4.7% calcium. All right, long question, important question. Probably we'll need to address this a little bit particularly later, but in another session. But what I would say first, winter. Energy is the only nutrient affected directly by temperature. Higher temperature, lower energy requirement. Lower temperature, higher energy requirement. At peak of production, 96, 97%, for every half degree that you go down for the thermal neutrality, you increase in almost 1 to 1.2 kilocalories per bird per day the energy requirement. So, of course, body temperature 41 degrees, the more you go lower, more energy it's necessary to keep the metabolic functions of the bird and to keep the body at 41 degrees. So, of course, lower the energy, more you're going to increase. So you can easily do that for every, just to make the mathematics a little bit easy, let's say 22 to 24 degrees. Every degree that you move below that, or even from the thermal neutrality, if you were at 30 something degrees and you have a stable energy intake, for every degree that you decrease, you're going to increase in almost 2 kilocalories per bird per day the requirements of this bird. So yes, it is expected then to eat more, and you need a higher energy intake to keep the same feed intake in the winter. Okay, and that's, you said about the calcium here, I agree. The best way to do is you change the energy levels on the diet. You're going to have a new feed intake. As this feed intake stabilizes, then you define the calcium and the amino acid levels. Okay. Pre-peak, that was mentioned there, that's the challenging part. The nutritional recommendations that we have, let's say 280 to 290 kilocalories per bird per day for the W80, 800 milligrams of lysine, 4 grams of calcium. Yes, this is for 100 grams, 100 and something grams. When it's 80 grams, well, if you divide everything and increase it 20% more, you're going to have the 4.7, 4.8% calcium, as you said. So that's why I like this pre-peak concept, where you're going to do a specific diet, maybe with a little bit less energy, but more amino acids, more calcium and phosphorus, just for 2-3 weeks until 21, 22 days. You're going to help boost the feed intake faster. And as they come 95 grams, then you do a proper formula for peak of production. So you do a pre-peak and a peak. That's the best approach for me. What would be the proportion between energy and protein during the production phase for laying hens? Well, this is a concept that is more logic for broilers, not so much for laying hens, because broilers are very poor in regulate the feed intake according to the energy intake. And that's the completely opposite for laying hens. Laying hens behaves like broilers until 6 weeks of age. Leghorns, browns until 10 to 12 weeks of age. After that, they start to regulate the feed intake according to the energy intake. So if you try to provide the energy to amino acid intake, and it's not according to where it should be, the hens will change the feed intake to eat the energy that they want or they need. So it's very tricky to indicate energy to amino acids or energy to protein intake for laying hens or balance, because it will change according to the body weight and it will change according to the temperature. So my answer would be, we don't have one. Is mycoplasma control program necessary in laying hens? If it's so, what should be the protocol? Greg, I leave this to you and Dr. Hama.
Yes, so definitely. Obviously, if you are in an area where you don't have a field challenge, it's not necessary. But let's face it, the majority of the areas that we do farm chickens in have got mycoplasma. It also depends which mycoplasma you're dealing with, whether it's a Mycoplasma synovia or gallinorum. In the end, your approach is more or less similar. There are vaccination options. We have very good vaccines for mycoplasma control, and I would really suggest that that be your first option. The other way to go about it is through medication. When you do medicate a positive flock, you will never make those birds negative. It's important to remember that. What you are doing by medicating those birds is to reduce the level of mycoplasma in those birds to a level that the birds are able to produce an immune response that the birds are able to cope with that level of challenge. So there are two ways of going about it, either through the medication route, and your veterinarian will be able to assist you with working out a program as to how to medicate that flock. But I would really strongly recommend you consider the vaccine options. I feel those are the more long-lasting and sustainable options.
Great. Thanks a lot, Greg. Next questions. Can we totally remove phosphorus and methionine at 60 weeks plus birds and superdose with phytase? Not the best practice, but I understand where the question is coming from. We had a lot of noise these last 2 years about some publications in ESPN showing a very good performance of these birds without any phosphate addition. Just with phytase on superdose, of course, as said there, and the phosphorus that was removed from the cereals, from the grains. This worked very well in this trial, mainly because it was a very controlled trial in terms of calcium. So remember what we said, when a bird, they have two sources of calcium, the feed and the bones. If you take all the calcium you need from the feed, you take very little calcium from the bones. If you don't have a good calcium available in the feed, you're going to deplete a lot of calcium from the bones. The problem is that when you remove calcium, you also remove phosphorus from the bones. And remember that you have a calcium intake that's 10 to 15 times higher than phosphorus per day. So whenever you do a bad work in calcium, you increase a lot the requirements of phosphorus, much more than you increase the requirements of the own calcium. So that's the problem. Calcium changes a lot the requirement of the phosphorus. So if you work as almost digestible calcium, analyzing all the calcium that's getting in the bird, all the calcium that's getting out of the bird, analyzing ionized calcium, and being completely sure that they have all the calcium that they need, yes, you don't need phosphorus in the diet. But of course, we are not able to do that in a commercial exploitation. So I would say that it's feasible to be done in a trial that's not so feasible to be done in a commercial farm. So that would be my answer.
With a small submission here, that question might be, after 60 weeks, can we completely remove MCP or DCP as a phosphorus source by using superdose of phytase?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. No.
Okay.
No, because you need to control the calcium very well to be able to remove the phosphorus. Because as I say, the phosphorus requirement will be depending on the calcium. If you are not controlling the calcium, you cannot be sure that the phosphorus requirements are low enough to remove all the MCP. So that would be my opinion. It can be done. It will be very, very risky. Further information on pre-peak phase, please. Yes, pre-peak phase for me, crucial. What I like to do is you have the requirements for peak phase, 805 milligrams of lysine per bird per day. I increase in at least 10%. I do a formula for 880 that, depending on the feed intake, it's almost 1% of digestible lysine in this diet. I do the calcium around 4%, 4.2%. I do the energy around 2,500, 2,600. And then I will feed these birds for 2-3 weeks only. I don't let them overcome 70 to 80% of production in this phase. We should never let the bird peak in the pre-peak phase. So you feed for 2-3 weeks, and then you move to the peaking phase. That would be my practical recommendation. And mainly, and the most important point, I didn't say, at least 20 to 30% more vitamins and trace minerals. How to control fat liver? From the nutritional side, fat liver can have two main causes: uneven energy intake, and this energy intake that's been, of course, birds regulate the energy intake quite well, but if they have a lack of other nutrients, or if you have any especially bad body weight profile in the growing phase, they can have a very uneven energy intake. So this can happen and generate fat liver, but also mycotoxins. And I do remember that the results of mycotoxins for India are quite impressive. So the main point for me is the fat liver associated with excessive fat pad? Then we go to check a little bit on the energy side. If the fat liver is not associated with excessive fat pad, then we're gonna check some mycotoxins or other possible contaminants or intoxication in the bird. Eggshell strength increasing. I don't know if this is a question or a comment. If it's a comment, yes, the eggshell strength is increasing, and that's a huge part of our selection. If it's a question, yes, we are selecting these birds for dynamic shell quality, and that's not only shell stiffness, but shell flexibility. So yeah, it's part of our selection, and the local selection in India is helping a lot with that. For 100 grams day feeding consumption, how much protein and energy should be given considering 1,600 grams, 1.6 kilos? Protein, that's the thing. I don't do any diet based on protein anymore, because protein is an old concept that would be you give some protein just to cover all the amino acids. But since the 1950s, the 1960s, we have nutrition specifically for every single amino acid, and not the total amino acids, but the digestible amino acids. So the protein would be a consequence of that. And of course, you can give all the amino acids with a higher or a lower protein, depending on the synthetic amino acids that you have. If you have 3 amino acids only, or let's say 2 amino acids, let's say just methionine and lysine, you're probably gonna need 18 to 19% of protein in the peaking phase to cover all the other amino acids. If you have 4 to 5 amino acids, let's say methionine, lysine, threonine, isoleucine, valine, even tryptophan, you can do the same peaking phase with 15% of protein. So the more synthetic amino acids you have, less protein you need. So in average, I would say 16 grams of protein, but that's an average calculation. And of course, can be much more, can be much less, depending on the amino acid. Energy, at peak of production, 1.6 kilos, about 290 kilocalories at thermoneutrality. If it's, of course, hot as India, it can be as low as 270, 265 kilocalories. In field condition, body weight is achieved in 16, 18 weeks, and the bird production will remain 88, 90%. So I understand the question is, you achieve the body weight standards only at 16, 18 weeks, and the production never goes higher than 90%. If this is the question, yes, totally expected, because as we said, the body weights at 18, 19 weeks or 16, 18 weeks, all the systems are already formed. And that moment you are just putting fat on this bird. So if you don't achieve the body weight for the first week, for the week number 5, for the week number 12, yes, it doesn't surprise me that your production will not overcome 90%. You need to overcome the body weights since the first week. But this is more on the management side as well. So I ask Greg to give some words here, Greg.
No, you're 100% right. It's got more you have to look at the total picture, not just the 16 and 18 week picture. So if you only manage to achieve the body weight standard at this age, at 16 weeks, that means that you have been under the standard for the preceding week. The bird that you are growing essentially is a short, fat bird. So that little bird will, although she's on body weight, she's heavy enough. Yes, she doesn't have the physiology, she doesn't have the skeletal structure to be able to give you a peak higher than 90%. So it's all about trying to maintain that body weight standard from the beginning, from day one, with the flock, in order to achieve the bird that is skeletally and physiologically ready to hit a good peak.
Perfect. Do you wanna? I lost the next question. We will. Yeah, the questions are moving here. What is the best way for disposing dead birds? Do you want to take this, Greg?
This depends on the local authority. Usually, your region will probably have an authority that has got some recommendation as to what is and what is not allowed. Mortality pits are common, but you do need to obviously make sure that those mortality pits are well closed so that no wild animals or rodents and even people in some cases have got access to them. What you also need to make sure is that those mortality pits are working. So there are enzymes that you can buy to add to the pit to make sure that the digestion is quick. Burning is also another option, but you need to really use a lot of fuel and able to properly burn a carcass. So I would first I would check what the rules are for the region that you are in, and then have a look at the options available. There are quite a few.
Very nice. Thanks, Greg. How the environmental factors like high humidity and temperature affects the nutrient requirements and uptake, and ultimately performance targets in open sheds, and how to overcome the issue? Yes. I've been in the AP area during the summer, and I don't miss that. 47 degrees with high humidity. Yes, that's not pleasant. And well, this is an extreme condition, okay? Extreme condition, so extreme that's not even in the models, right? The models of temperature effect for laying hens, they don't go more than 36 degrees. 36 degrees, it's a breeze for you guys. So you are in a most extreme condition. What we can say is excessive temperature decreases the energy requirement, fact, but also decreases the feed intake capacity of the bird. That's another fact. So it will be depending on which one will be playing the stronger role here. If the feed intake decreases more than the energy decrease, the energy requirement decrease, these birds will need to eat more and more, but they won't have the capacity, or you need to increase more and more levels. If the energy requirements decrease a little bit more than the feed intake decrease, it's a little bit easier to control. But the problem is, the main part for me is at this extreme temperature, there's nothing much you can do in open sheds, because the birds will just be fainting all the day and just trying to keep alive and cope with the water that sometimes is 56 degrees Celsius, because we still have a lot of surface pipes going around. So for me, it's a matter of try to put fans, try to put a little bit of foggers, but at this humidity, it doesn't help that much. And for me, the key point is try to keep the water as cold as possible in the amount the birds need. Just try to keep them alive. Feed these birds in the night, feed these birds, change the lighting program, avoid these birds to be eating and during the hottest part of the day. But yeah, I don't know, Greg knows about heat stress much more than I, because he's in a hot area. So probably you can add something here, Greg.
Yeah, not specifically towards the nutrient or the nutrition side of that answer, but perhaps to the environmental side, and that's to try and keep the environment as cool as possible. For the sake of time here, I'm going to refer you back to the website that we've got, because a lot of information is there. But really, we should be doing everything in our capacity to try and move air across those birds and keep them cool. And obviously, this takes a bit of preparation. So from our part, if we can predict these heat events, it's going to play to our favor. So monitoring the weather forecast, seeing when the hot weather is going to be upon us and planning for it, so that we can help those birds best cope that period of heat stress.
Awesome. What is is right to reduce metabolic energy from grower to pre-layer to stimulate the feed intake? Ideally, we want to have an increasing energy intake to help to provide or to form fat reserves of these birds. But if you have a slight reduction, it can help with the feed intake stimulation. So I would say you can do, but you just be sure that even from the pre-lay, from the pre-peak, you can do, but just be sure it's not too much decreasing energy to a point to make it difficult to accumulate fat. And mainly, and most important, don't let the birds peak on a low energy diet, because this will affect the body reserves. You can do that, but not more than 21, 22 weeks, no more than 80 to 90 grams of feed intake. Then you shift to a peak diet. Otherwise, what we are trying to do to help them eat better, it will affect the peak of the bird. Do you want to take this on IBV, Greg?
If the flock was infected with IBV, production goes down to 60%. After supporting treatment, no, not gain in birds production. Can we force molting birds aged 64 weeks? Production goes down to 60%. Shucks. I would certainly recommend molting in this case. If you've been at 60% for more than 2 weeks and you see that really you're not improving, I think it's worth a try. These are things that we experiment with a bit in the field. We never quite know how the flock is going to respond, but usually if they've taken a hard knock and there's no permanent damage to the oviduct, molting does reboot the system and you can get some eggs out of them again. But we have a molting program that Hi-Line recommends. It's a non-fast molt. We do know that the fasting molt is practiced in the field. I'm sure your technical people will have a recommendation there, which is specific to the area.
All right, very good. For the time here, I guess I will skip this lead light question because Greg is going to be specifically addressing that next week, right, Greg?
Yeah.
So I will go to the next questions. How to control prolapse mortality at peaking even with the uniformity higher than 85%? For sure, lack of mortality, it's one lack of uniformity is one of the key points here. It's not very common to see prolapse with a very high uniform flock. So yeah, always double check if the uniformity is really that good. But of course, you still have some factors as excessive light, as excessive egg weight. Even if you have a good uniformity with a low body weight, you can have prolapse because of that. You can have one of very common source of prolapse for these birds is hypocalcemia and low levels of sodium. Both of these, it can affect even low levels of potassium. All of this can affect the muscular functions of the bird, and they will lay the egg and they will keep the cloaca open for a longer time and not retracting. So this can lead some packing. So you have some nutritional factors there, but always double check this uniformity because it's not so common to have prolapse at this uniformity. What would be the major points to be considered for better production in NED? Is it Newcastle or is this
for better production and I think that's good shell quality for old flocks.
Okay, yeah. So that's
Yeah.
what a little bit what we said already. It's prevention and uniformity, and mainly understand the quality and the timing of your calcium nutrition, and not only the calcium levels in your limestone. Some farmers are giving more than 4.5 to 5% calcium, like 130 to 150 kilocalories of limestone per ton during the late laying period. What is the impact of this practice on phytase and other enzyme activity? Well, we know that excessive calcium will affect the endogenous enzymes activity, will compromise the feed conversion of the bird, will compromise the amino acid absorption of these birds, and can potentially affect all of this. In other hand, I would expect that at least half, if not 70 to 65% of this limestone is on the coarse particle or the coarse presentation. So if everything is well, if this bird is not over stress, they should regulate this quite well. So in a healthy flock, what I would say is they will not eat all this limestone, even that you are providing. But if this limestone is in the fine form, it's not possible then to select out, or if they are under any kind of stress, yes, you can have a lot of problems with these levels of calcium. And it will affect not only phytase, but all the endogenous enzymes as well. How's Hi-Line W80 response to summer stress? What are the effective measures in terms of the nutrition and management? Well, this is a presentation for itself. Yeah, on its own. For sure, one of the main purposes to have a breeding program in India and have selection in India is to produce a bird more and more adaptable to the local conditions. And we are being able to achieve this generation after generation. We can see clearly in the results, the evolution of results we have in the last 4 years, 4.5 years are impressive, and will be even more. Now we are seeing some better resistance, not only to summer, but for mycotoxins and for the local nutritional conditions. So the genetic improvements are helping us to achieve that. In terms of nutrition and management, there's a lot of stuff, and probably, well, we did some webinars on that already, but yeah, it's a lot of stuff to answer here. How to reduce body weight, especially at or above 60 weeks, considering 75% of uniformity and 20% bird body weight above standard. Yeah. So as always, what I would say is the best way, of course, is try to not let the birds achieve this body weight. But as we said, 45 to 50% of the energy requirements is for body weight maintenance. So if you gradually reduce the energy intake of these birds, keeping the amino acid intake, you can gradually reduce the body weights. But this has to be very, very gradual and smooth, because of course, if you do that in a very unbalanced way, let's say like this, you will affect production for sure. So it can be done, but it's very fine tuning and very measuring temperature, production, body weight gain, and then you can gradually reduce the energy to try to control a little bit or reduce a little bit this body weight, but it's challenging. If feed intake is high, can we restrict feed intake at 100 grams and maintain all amino acid and all other nutrition as per 100 grams requirements without affecting production? I'm not a huge fan of this approach, because we are talking about a population and we are talking about averages, but we have individuals there. And what happened is, if you have a 100-gram average feed intake, well, you have birds eating 110 and you have birds eating 90 grams. You have heavier birds, you have smaller birds. You have birds with higher requirements and lower requirements. And mainly you have dominant birds and you have dominated birds. If you try to restrict the feed intake, what will happen is the dominant bird will kick all the other hens out. They will go there and they will eat whatever they want. They will eat 110, they will eat 115, and the other dominated bird will stay behind. And when it gets to her turn, she will have only 85 to 90 grams of feed. So in my experience, whenever you try to restrict feed intake physically, you affect the uniformity. So my answer would be do the proper nutrition and management. If you want then to decrease the feed intake, you increase the energy, you decrease the particle size and make a finer diet so it takes longer for them to eat. But in my experience, whenever trying to limit the feed intake, you're going to have some negative effects in body weight uniformity.
Okay, so that's the wrap.
All right.
So if I can just remind everybody, there will be a link that will be sent to them soon for the survey.
You will create that about the link and then the next session, and then we can complete the session.
Yes. So thank you everyone, and thank you Vitor and Greg for all the responses. And just want all of you to know that we have a continuation of this session, which is on 7th of February on Monday. That will be led by Greg, and the link is the same one. However, we've also put that link in the chat. So if somebody else who's not registered, so have them registered for this link, and we will see you again on 7th of February. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Just one thing, they'll get the link by email, right, for the survey?
Yes, the survey link will be sent on email to them. Yes, and they can.
My request to everybody is to really take a few minutes and give feedback on the link to the survey so that we can serve you better. Thank you very much. Stay safe, everybody. Good night. Good day, Greg and Vitor.
Good night.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Greg, for all the help.
Thanks, Vitor. Cheers, everyone.